So we're about to be entering into West Oak Cliff. It's important to note that Tyler Street and Polk Street were just recently converted from one-way to two-way streets. Tyler and Polk Street were recently converted to two-way streets. So this is just been restriped and redone in the last month. We're hoping it should be a two-way street. Okay, can y'all hear me now? Perfect. So what I was saying is Tyler Street and Polk Street were recently converted to two-way streets from being one-way, and we'll drive through some of that. And as part of that, they've also added in some bike lanes on these streets. So when we cross 12th, which will be right here, that's when we technically enter into West Oak Cliff, or the boundary for the study area. That I don't know. Sometimes I know they just kind of put it here on these cycles for a little while to get people used to it. So up there at that light, Mike, you're going to take a right, Clarendon. Yeah, I think they reconstructed that whole stretch all the way up to Davis. Yeah. So we're about to take a right onto Clarendon. This is an area that we'll be heading towards our first stop, and we're not going to stop. We'll just slowly go through it, which is Clarendon and Edgefield. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But really, everything that will be on the left side of the van is the South Edgefield neighborhood. So that's the area, one of the areas of where we've been talking about considering this missing middle housing on certain locations and on the large lots. And it's the area where we've heard from many of the neighbors. So as we get up to Edgefield and Clarendon, this is authorized hearing 189143. We're not quite there yet, but this is a location that's currently zoned CR. And the area plan is recommending exploring opportunities to amend to a form-based zoning which would encourage neighborhood-scale mixed-use development. So the plan recommends allowing for reduced parking ratios and the use of on-street parking to count towards requirements to enable easier redevelopment of some of these historic legacy commercial buildings that we can see if you take a left here at Edgefield. Sure, yeah.
We can't hear the question from the back. So.
And if I need to sit in the middle, I'll sit in the middle.
No, we just can't hear whatever the question is.
She asked him to speak up.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh.
We'll pass that on.
Yeah. So the area plan also recommends considering amending the zoning to ensure future land uses provide pedestrian-oriented design through public realm design and building placement, utilizing design standards to enhance pedestrian mobility by minimizing curb cuts and parking locations in a hazardous vehicular pedestrian conflict points. Additionally, the plan recommends considering prohibition of new drive-through restaurants and drive-through banks through any future zoning change. So that was an area that already had, so take a left here at Nolte. That was an area that already had an authorized hearing filed about 4 years ago. So we'll be turning here on Nolte, which kind of takes us through the heart of the South Edgefield neighborhood, and we'll see some of those particularly large single-family lots that we've been talking about. The majority of them are going to be on the left side of the van when we get up here in a few blocks, or a block or so. I'll go ahead and just kind of talk about the Tyler Vernon DART station since we're in that area. It's one of 2 DART stations that lies in West Oak Cliff. It is the lowest ridership DART station in all of Dallas. Additionally, the station area surrounding the DART station has the highest percentage of single-family land use of any DART station in Dallas. Although the area plan makes no recommendations for the DART station specifically, because DART doesn't own a large amount of land there the way they do at a lot of other locations, The plan does make the following recommendations for the area around the station. Within a half mile, consider creating a zoning overlay or using proposed conservation districts. We're creating new infill residential zoning categories to permit missing middle housing. Yeah, take a right. And then you're going to go past the station and we'll turn. Oh, that was, can you turn here and go through the DART? So we'll go through where DART currently has their buses go through. Take a left, sorry. Left. So this is where the DART buses come through. This is the station itself. An additional recommendation was, in conjunction with citywide parking code reform, consider parking code reductions for all commercial, residential, and office uses within a half mile of the station. Then, additionally, on all non-residentially zoned properties within a half mile of the DART station, explore opportunities to amend the zoning to spur future neighborhood-scale mixed-use development while encouraging scale and setbacks that are contextually sensitive to surrounding neighborhoods. So we're recommending no more than 3 stories, existing RPS to apply here, all of that. And all of that is similar to what the CR zoning already has. So if you go straight, another block, and we're going to take a right on Elmdale.
Daniel, there was a large lot right across that station. Right now, it looks like a lot.
Yeah.
That single zone at the moment?
That one's zoned to L01, but it's owned by DART. You have to take a right here at Elmdale. So it's owned by DART, and I believe it's owned by DART. It used to be a parking lot for DART, and then I think it's been sold, actually. There's interest in developing it. You know that. So we're coming up on... Is this still South Edge? This is now the Polk Vernon neighborhood. Kind of everything south of the station is Polk Vernon Neighborhood Association. So we'll be coming up on a house that you may have seen in the briefing. Nothing against the house at all, but it's an example of some new residential construction that we know is coming into the area. So it's right here on the right. We know that new single family is getting... some of these old properties are being torn down and new single families coming in. That's substantially larger and higher in value. So take a right on Polk, and we'll go up 2 or 1.5 blocks to, I think it's Elmwood Boulevard. It's the street where you see those crosswalks. Yes, take a left here. So this is, we'll see out the right side of the van, we'll see the new trail extension that was constructed for the Elmwood Greenway. This is all city-owned right-of-way. This connects a park all the way up to the DART station, and it's a heavily used asset for the neighborhood for walking and biking and things like that. This is now the Elmwood neighborhood. Elmwood was built mostly between the 20s and the 40s. I keep going straight. So that we maybe should have turned over there. This is so confusing. Yeah, you turn. Or go straight. Go straight. It'll get us there. I believe so. Maybe not. You may need to turn around. Yeah, so Elmwood was constructed between the 20s and the 40s. One of the recommendations in the plan is, yeah, actually just take a left here. That'll take us the exact same way. So one of the recommendations, the neighborhood association is interested in creating a conservation district in this neighborhood due to the historical nature of the homes and preserving some of the architectural character of the area. So we're now heading south down Edgefield, so we're heading towards that number 3 on your map. And this is so we're about to head into the downtown Elmwood area, which is authorized hearing 178142. This location is currently zoned CR. Area plan is recommending considering exploring opportunities, again, for a form-based zoning to encourage neighborhood-scale mixed use, recommending reduced parking ratios and the use of on-street parking to count towards requirements to enable easier redevelopment of commercial legacy buildings. It's worth noting this black house right here is Zone CR. A coffee shop is trying to open, and they don't have enough parking, so they can't open. As a part of this rezoning, the area plan also recommends considering amending the zoning to ensure pedestrian-oriented design through public realm design and building placement. The plan also recommends considering prohibition of new drive-throughs and drive-through banks. And the area plan is recommending considering amending the zoning to permit selling alcohol within 500 feet of schools and churches by SUP, which is currently not allowed. And we know that there's a lot of restaurants that have wanted to open but don't want to enter the market because they can't sell alcohol. We're recommending no taller than 3 stories, the existing height limit that is today. So if you want to maybe go past the dog park and we'll kind of circle back. So this is Elm Wolf Dog Park. It's city-owned right-of-way, but it's kind of a community-organized park, and pretty popularly used. It's actually one of the few dog parks in all of southern Dallas. So one of our recommendations is to work with the Parks Department to get a dog park built in West Oak Cliff. It's likely that would be at either Moss Park or Martin Weiss Park, purely because of the amount of land that's needed. Yeah, so take a left and then take a left at the next stop sign. I think it'd probably be the best. So all of this in here is zoned CR. It quickly falls off into the neighborhood just right over there. Yeah, so take a left here. So, fun fact about downtown Elmwood, it's actually where they filmed part of Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise in the 1980s. Oliver Stone bought the entire district and turned it into a film studio. Yes, it goes straight. Some of the recommendations for this area also include public realm reconstruction for the area through a future bond project to make the area a lot more walkable, because obviously we can see there's a lot of areas without sidewalks, just making it more pedestrian friendly. It is. It's at the end of the CR zoning. So yeah, so now we're in R75. Correct. Yes, they'd be separate. The authorized hearing's already been filed. It would need to be a different authorized hearing for the conservation district. It's to take a little right, and then a left. Little jog. And so this is that trail extension that we drove by earlier right here. We're about to be driving down Elmwood Boulevard. So this is all still part of Elmwood, although this area is a little more recent in construction. You'll see some more ranch and mid-century modern style homes from the 40s to the 60s. Try to take us on as many routes with speed bumps as possible. They're all about 7,500 square feet, so they're all R75. They're mostly 40 to 50 feet wide and about 150 deep. Some of the ones over on the right side are larger because they're wider lots, and then they also back up to a creek, so there's a lot of topography and floodplain there. So I'll go ahead and start talking about the Hampton Dart Station since we're on our way. Actually, before I do that, let's make sure I navigate you the right way. So before you get up to Hampton, you're going to turn one street before at Hollywood. Make sure we can do that. Not really. There's just one street called Hollywood, and the next one's Montreal, so... It's not this turn. It should be kind of right there by that Escalade, I think. So Hollywood is actually one of the streets that, not right here, I don't believe, but the Dallas Sidewalk Master Plan has prioritized this entire area around here for sidewalk repair and construction. It was one of the focus areas in the Dallas Sidewalk Master Plan due to its proximity to the Hampton Dart Station, as well as its proximity to all of this commercial. So kind of starting, once we get through the stop sign to our right, it's all zoned CR currently. There's a mixture of commercial uses in here. Okay, so when you get to the light at Hampton, take a right. Take a right, and then so this is Illinois. So we're about to take a right on Illinois, and then we'll take a right on Hampton. So in this CR area, one of our recommendations is to consider a future zoning change. It's not an authorized hearing that's been filed, but our recommendation is to consider potentially a future authorized hearing to amend the zoning to allow for a greater mixture of uses. Right now it's zone CR, so it can only be retail, so no residential can be permitted here. But again, keeping height to 3 stories, neighborhood scale mixed use is the recommendation. So we're heading north on Hampton, and we're about to get to the Hampton Dart Station, so we can pull in there. That might be a good place to pull in, and we can just kind of park for a second so I can read and catch up. Right up here past that railroad crossing sign to turn in. Right here. So that Hampton Dart Station has a large surface parking lot, as we can obviously see, that according to Dart data is on average 40% or less occupied on any given day. That was all pre-pandemic data, so I think we can see today that it's even less than that. These numbers, as a part of this was endorsed by Dallas City Council, Dart and the Office of Economic Development and Planning and Urban Design are working with DART right now to release RFPs for development through public-private partnership on multiple DART stations throughout the city, on underdeveloped parking lots such as this one, and underdeveloped land that's owned by DART. So through this area planning process, knowing that that was going to occur regardless, the city engaged the neighborhood to determine the types of uses, scale of development. Maybe just park for a second so I can kind of read through this. So we engaged the community to, what they wanted to see here. Community is supportive of development no taller than 4 stories, concentrated only on the existing parking lot, so that would be that large parking field closer to Hampton. To contain a mixture of uses, including affordable housing, ground-level retail, incubator spaces and maker spaces, and community spaces such as a community room. Neighborhoods around the station also desire for there to be some usable public open space as a part of the development. So that's an ongoing process that the RFP is expected to be released soon by the city's Economic Development Office and DART. So the area plan is just informing type of development that people want to see here. The other recommendations for the Hampton Station area are also considering permitting some of the missing middle housing on the large lots that we talked about. There's not a whole lot of that around the Hampton Dart Station. Just due to the zoning of the R75, most of the lots are 7,500 square feet. Additionally, consider amending the zoning to ensure that future land uses provide pedestrian-oriented design, public realm design and building placement, location of curb cuts, parking locations. And then lastly, as a way to ensure affordability, explore inclusion of the mixed income density bonus to allow additional density if that area, so that's on the CR area, if that were to ever be rezoned, ensure that any zoning change would include the mixed income density bonus so that if any residential was constructed, that some of the residential would be affordable. And as well as the last one, just like the Tyler Vernon Station area, consider parking code reform to reduce parking requirements for commercial, residential, and office uses within a half-mile of this DART station to make it easier to save the old buildings and more financially viable development can occur. That was a lot. That's it. So there, in terms of this station, There's not a whole lot of properties. I'm trying to remember specifically. There are a few properties in Elmwood that are large, but again, those are the ones that have a lot of topography, floodplain issues. So even though they're large, they probably wouldn't be able to be constructible. There are some lots. There are some double lots kind of tucked away in East Hampton Hills and Hampton Hills and in Jimtown. So there's some large corner lots. That's very few number. It's probably 30 or less for the entire area. That is correct. If that is only if recommendation were to consider those lot sizes of a particular size. Again, all of this would be determined through a future authorized hearing. If you take a left here, I think this is Marlboro? No, South Oak Cliff Boulevard. Yes, yeah, so turn here. So this is where the Hampton Hills neighborhood and the East Hampton Hills neighborhood kind of meet. Hampton Hills being on the left, East Hampton Hills being on the right. I think turn here on Wilton, yeah, and we'll kind of cut over a block or two. Yeah, go over 2 blocks. We'll kind of zigzag a little. Go 1 more block to Hollywood, I think, and take a right. So Hampton Hills is another neighborhood that is interested in creating a conservation district. They've reached out to the conservation district office and have already started that discussion. They have one of the largest groupings of Tudor houses in the entire city. So we'll kind of drive through this and you can see that. So they're interested in preserving the character of the neighborhood. So some of those large lots that I talked about, some of them are churches, as I mentioned. So like that one right there would be an example of a large lot that would technically qualify. It's zoned R75, but we know that the church is using the parking and needs the parking, and so it seems very unlikely that that would develop into any sort of housing. I guess on Emmett, take a right. We'll go 2 blocks, back 2 blocks, and then, yeah, doing a little zigzagging. So the next area that we're going to drive through here in a few seconds is the Hampton-Clarendon intersection. This is authorized hearing 189349. But I'll wait till we get to Clarendon to kind of talk through that. It's a good question. I'm not sure. We do know that there are a lot of illegally constructed duplexes and triplexes that are violating code but occur in this neighborhood and indicating housing affordability issues. So we're about to get up to Clarendon. This whole area that we're going to drive through is zoned CR. There's a few one-off properties that are zoned either parking, CS, or RR, and then one property that's MU1. The area plan recommends considering form-based zoning for neighborhood-scale mixed-use development, no taller than 3 stories. As you can tell, there's a lot of historic old buildings that are up against the street. Many of these we know are unable to find tenants because of lack of parking, and so our recommendation is for reduced parking ratios for the use of on-street parking to count towards their parking requirements. Additionally, considering this is where we heard a lot of concerns from the auto repair shops of recommendations, so we reworked the recommendation to not make any references to auto-centric businesses, but instead it's purely about pedestrian-oriented design for any sort of future construction. So here we're coming up on Hampton. So the authorized hearing stretches a few blocks to the north and to the south. You can see some of those old buildings that exist down there as well. So take a left here at Franklin. So the Jimtown neighborhood is here on the left. It was really this whole neighborhood, but the area that's zoned MF2 is all of this area to the left. It was zoned MF2 in the 60s. As you can tell, it's single-family housing. It's a single-family land use. So all of this, it's 50 properties in all. 48 of the properties are single-family homes, as you can see, built in the 20s and 30s. And then here, we're going to be turning onto this street. This is where, built in the mid-80s, I believe, there were 2 apartment complexes built. Everything else has continued to remain single-family. It's possible. Again, there are some that exist in this area. So here's some of the apartments here to the left. The Neighborhood Association for Jimtown, who has a representative on our task force, Mary Lou Parras, they've been working with us. They reached out to the council member years ago, concerned that the current zoning would permit apartments and townhomes to come in, which obviously aren't reflective of the neighborhood character, and so they wanted to preserve their neighborhood and keep it the way it is. That authorized hearing is authorized hearing 189240, and our recommendation is either rezoning it through a conservation district or another base zoning to permit only single family with accessory dwelling units. That's something that the Neighborhood Association is in support of. They're also interested in considering some urban design standards for residential construction to make sure if there is any new construction that it fits in with the rest of the neighborhood. Yeah, so keep going north a couple blocks to this intersection. We're not technically supposed to deviate. To which street? So this whole area is zoned CR. Again, there may be 1 or 2 properties that are zoned differently. We do know that one property was rezoned 5 to 6 years ago. This is south of Clarendon, but was zoned to MU1. It was a 2-story building where the upstairs was renovated into 2 apartments, and the downstairs has some retail. That would be permitted in the rest of the zoning districts currently. Our recommendation is to consider mixed-use zoning for this area to allow that, but again, keep it to 3 stories. Additionally, I didn't mention this when we were on Clarendon. Clarendon is a street that we're recommending bike lanes on. That was something that our transportation department has funding for. It's something that the community is supportive of because it's a 2-lane street, much safer than putting bike lanes on Hampton. Like it might rain. I do not believe so. I think Country Burger is the only one. I guess it is a drive-through. I was going to say. So that's the only, and that's actually not technically in the authorized hearing boundary. Our recommendation is to expand the boundary to capture all of the retail instead of it was the way it was drawn is it ended at Burlington. So our recommendation is to consider expanding the boundary to include a whole area that's commercial. for fear that if we change the zoning in one area, it's only going to push those uses to another area way. So consider expanding the boundary as part of the authorized hearing request. Yeah, so take a left. I know it's a tight little thing. We barely fit right here. Just take a left. That is correct. It is R75. Well, maybe TH3 right there because there are some duplexes in there. But it returns to being single family in character as soon as you get north of Tom Thumb. So if you So that grocery store, El Rio Grande, is actually where we had one of our pop-up events. Frequently used grocery store in the area. We'll talk more about the West Davis corridor in a little while. So take a left up there at the light. Straight. So just go straight through here. You know, kind of veer to the left, but you know what I mean.
You can go inside on Google Maps. You can?
When you get up to Gladstone, is it Gladstone?
Yeah.
That's right. Just go ahead and just slow down a little, Mike. So this area, this house right up here in blue, is a old quadplex that's been in the neighborhood. So the zoning is currently, it's a district zoning. It's R75, but that's a quadplex right there that has been around since the streetcar used to run through the neighborhood 70, 80 years ago. So that's an example of some missing middle housing that already exists here in the neighborhood. Go ahead and take a right here on Brooklyn. In terms of massing, that I don't know. Again, our recommendations would be to stay within the form, height, lot coverage, massing requirements of R75. That one may possibly deviate. I'm not sure. We've gotten up to Pierce. I think Pierce is right here. Yeah, so take a left here at Pierce. So this area that we're coming up on at Pierce and Catherine, so take a left, is what we're calling the Northcliffe Neighborhood Center. This is authorized hearing 189127. It's Subdistrict 2 of Conservation District 8 because North Cliff is in Conservation District. Let me just kind of stop up here at the stop sign so I can talk for a second. This is an area with single-family homes and some historic retail structures. This was the terminus of a streetcar line. Go ahead and just stop whenever you can. Just pull up here. So those buildings that we just passed are some historic retail structures which have been here since the 20s and 30s. The area plan recommends amending the zoning to allow for ADUs on the single family that's in the area, and then live-work units to be permitted, as well as single-family residential. The area plan is recommending the zoning. Right now, the zoning has its base in S zoning, but it is very restrictive on the uses that are allowed there, and it seems like it was grandfathered in from what was there in the 70s. So it was like barbershop and one other thing, and that's it. And so currently no uses can go in there, so the buildings have sat vacant since the 70s. So we're recommending allowing things such as art galleries and studios, personal service office, so things like the tax office, restaurants with alcohol sales by SUP, in addition to existing permitted uses, existing height and setback requirements, and another recommendation is for there to be some public realm improvements. As you can tell, there was no sidewalk back there. So that's something that could be considered through a future bond, is to just rebuild the street so that you have some on-street parking, some nice sidewalks, so that those buildings are more pedestrian friendly. Correct. Yeah, it's the authorized hearing covers, it's about 10 properties. So it includes those commercial properties that we drove by, and it goes up another 2 blocks past that church we drove by. So it includes some vacant properties and a few single-family homes. So the zoning allows the single-family homes, but it also allows currently it allows for other things. So those homes could, if they wanted to, they could repurpose themselves into some retail today if they wanted to. So the authorized hearing could change that if we wanted to, and just focus it retail to be just in that one area. So that's something that could be considered.
Virtual space also locked out by environments.
Yeah, exactly. So we know that they don't have any parking really, and so they're unable to get tenants because they don't have enough parking. So our recommendation is for reduced parking ratios and allowing on-street parking to count, so that we're in shared parking agreements, because there's a church parking lot a block away that's only used on Wednesdays and Sundays. Is that an opportunity as well? All right, keep driving, I guess. Are we on? Yeah, go over. Yeah, let's go ahead and go over to Ravinia. Yeah, so cut over 1 block. Yep, go all the way down to Illinois. So the North Cliff neighborhood is everything to the left, and then over to the right is really where the Dells neighborhood starts. Although their neighborhood association boundary, they ended at Westmoreland. We're back at Clarendon. We're continuing south on Ravinia. South of Clarendon, one of the recommendations in the plan is for bike lanes on this street. There's 3 schools. So there's 2 elementary schools and a middle school, kind of all in a row. There's some safe routes to school funding that the city already has. And considerations for bike lanes are a part of that. So it would be taking this from 4 lanes to 2 lanes with the center turn lane and bike lanes on the outside, as well as some sidewalk improvements. Yeah, it'd be protected of some kind. I do not believe so, no. I believe it is Salazar Elementary that we just drove by, and not this one, although I think that this one's on their list as well. But Trust for Public Land did their Cool Schools program, where they've made some... So this is... So we're coming up on Westmoreland. Yeah, so there's some areas in here that are zone TH3. So that zoning's existing. We're recommending no changes. This is an area that there's no neighborhood association, so there's no representatives on the task force. And so we're not recommending any zoning changes or land use changes in these areas. So up here is an area that, if you remember from the future land use map, is labeled as commercial center or corridor. It's currently zone CR. It's a couple of shopping centers and a few big box stores. Our recommendation is for that to remain exactly as it is. No recommendation for that to change in any way. This is a pretty vibrant shopping center, and the zoning should stay as it is. So take a left at the light. So as we head down this street, we'll be getting close to Westmoreland Dart Station. Technically, the Westmoreland Dart Station is south of Illinois, so it's in District 3. But obviously, it still serves as a transit center for everybody on the north side of the street. We're not making any recommendations for any land use changes around the station. The area is mostly zoned CR, but there are a few other zoning categories in there. It will be when we get to the other side of Illinois.
What is that building?
I think it's an old Southwestern Bell Exchange building or something. It's beautiful, yeah. Yeah, it's like an old AT&T Southwestern Bell building. Yeah, take a right. So it's kind of hard to see, but tucked away behind this strip center is the Westmoreland Dart Station. And you can also see straight ahead some of the new construction. That is some multifamily that is, I think 70% of the units are dedicated to be affordable. For the project that was constructed and came through zoning, you may recall, a handful of years ago. You're going to take a right up here at Coombs Creek. But everything on the left side is District 3, not in the West Oak Cliff boundary. And everything on the north side of the van is.
That's multi-family.
It is. I think it's zoned MF2. So we're about to turn up Coombs Creek Drive. This is, interestingly enough, it's kind of where, and you can tell there's a creek that begins right there. It's where 5 Mile Creek starts going that way. And when we get up to Martin Weiss Park, it's where Coombs Creek starts going the other direction. So it's really kind of the high point and it's where the watershed starts. This is Westmoreland Park right here, so it's a city park. As you'll notice as we drive on Coombs Creek, It's a very wide right-of-way. I think it's 120 feet wide in some places for a 2-lane street. And so our recommendation in the area plan is to consider reconstructing the road to have hike and bike trail with just kind of a linear park that connects that park through the neighborhood to Martin Weiss Park a couple blocks to the north. So it would just be simple, nice wide trail improvements with, we heard from the community they're interested in things like gardens, or interested in fitness stations and water fountains, just some green space, because currently there's not a whole lot in this neighborhood. Yeah, so this is where, again, the right-of-way it's very wide. There's obviously kind of some natural stormwater occurring. So some of our recommendations would be, if anything were to get built by the Parks Department, to include low-impact development and integrated stormwater management, so that we've got, we're minimizing any sort of flood impacts in the neighborhood. Right now, there's not a lot of storm sewer in the area. Okay, I mean, I'm on. Yeah, we can. Why don't we get up? Yeah, don't pop a tire, but. Okay, never mind. Onwards.
Good work.
So we're coming up on Martin Weiss Park and Recreation Center. It's the largest park in the West Oak Cliff study area, and it contains a rec center, and it's actually, the rec center is the only city-owned building inside the West Oak Cliff boundary. So it's, the park and the community center really serve as a community hub, all the neighborhoods around here. It's where we held vast majority of our in-person meetings. This is an area where we're recommending for the park, so the park starts here and goes all the way up to Clarendon, so we'll drive by it. We're recommending improvements to include a dog park, accessible and inclusive playground facilities, a splash pad, and some enhanced pedestrian access into the park, because currently there's some places it's pretty unsafe. All of this would be included in the Parks Department's need inventory, which could be included, depending on how it scores from their scoring criteria, could be included on the next bond. And I just talked about the linear park and trail that we've talked about. So there's an aquatic center here too.
Is there no playground?
There's a small one. I think that there's a desire for the community for much larger playground.
I'm shocked they have a park that big without a playground.
How are they going to do the playground?
Well, you fence it.
Yeah, that would be determined by the Parks Department and whoever they would hire as a landscape architect. But we know that there's obviously a fair amount of land, but there's still a desire to keep a lot of the area natural in its natural state. But there's some areas kind of on the other side of the parking lot over there. They're large and flat. So there's some
Yeah, because if you've got kids, you want to be able to take them to a playground.
I guess up here at the light, take a left, which is Westmoreland.
There's a drive-through, man. Heck in the bottom.
So this is another area that zones CR. Our recommendation in the future land use map is to keep it as commercial, commercial center corridor, and no recommendation for any land use changes here.
will say one thing. You're right. There's so many auto places. Right? Auto. No wonder they wanted to protect them.
So the neighborhood, the Dells that I mentioned, is over to the left. All the streets end in Dell of some kind.
Oh, they do that.
Yeah, it's like Brooklyn Dell, Ivan Dell. I don't know how it got its name, but they're all from the 20s.
That's kind of cute. I've seen that before.
Those machines always terrify me. It's just the one that chews up the street. I just imagine, like, I'm almost certain that that is zoned for single family. It's just, I don't know if it's a holdover from a church or something of that kind. I can look into that. I think so. So we're nearing the end of our tour, but before we end, we'll come up here onto West Davis and take a right. So the West Davis corridor was one of our focus areas. It does not have an authorized hearing. It's not an authorized hearing location. It's an area that is comprised of two different PDs. So it's PD 830 and PD 631. And that was really informed by the Davis Road land use study done way back in like 2006 or 2002. So that's what informed the zoning. Our recommendations are really to keep everything exactly as is, but there are a lot of sub-districts within those PDs. There are a few sub-districts within the PDs that currently permit car washes and drive-thrus. Those don't exist today in those areas, but they back up right against single-family homes, and the residents in Beverly Hills and El Tivoli neighborhood associations are concerned that those could get built in the future, and they wanted to just had it added into the plan that in the future considered updating those sub-districts within the PD to not allow those. We do know that there are some areas that do allow them, and those exist today. Additionally, this is a street that is a funded project by Dallas County and the city to reconstruct and rebuild the sidewalks and build bike lanes on the street. That's outside of this project, but that's a project that's ongoing. And another thing that we're recommending to be considered in this area as a part of citywide parking and zoning changes would be to consider parking reductions and shared use parking and remote parking to be considered in the future, because we know that a lot of these, similar to the other areas, a lot of these old buildings just don't have the adequate parking for uses. And I believe that's the end of our tour from a narration standpoint. I will say that this entire area on West Davis is in the Davis Garden TIF district. So, you know, everything on the north side of the street is outside of West Oak Cliff. But as you can see, there's a lot of new narrow lot single family and multifamily construction that's come into the area. And there was a lot of concern in this area about, you know, this kind of development arching down the road. That one back there, I believe it was David Weekley, but I'm not positive on that. I don't know. And then when we,
David Weekley does
those are typically for sale, yeah. So when we cross Hampton, we'll be out of West Oak Cliff.
Either. Yeah. I think it looks like his, but it's yeah, he does more.
At this point, we're going to stop recording and go back to City Hall. This concludes the CPC bus tour.